can do it. Change, change. It's a sure thing. Change, change. Expect a miracle change. Watch me change when you change the way you look at things. The things you look at change. When you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. When you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. When you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. Now do 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 change. Do 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 change. Do 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 change. Do do do.
The views and opinions of our guest and hosts do not necessarily reflect those of New Thought Media Network, or any organization we may be affiliated with. Here at New Thought Media Network, we welcome freedom of speech and courageous conversations. There are many topics that can be difficult to navigate. Challenging the status quo and engaging in lively debate is important to expanding our understanding of one another, and life in general. Creating a peaceful world doesn't happen because no one disagrees, it happens from a willingness to understanding one another. In our programming, we strive to expand consciousness and assist people in creating remarkable lives. Your comments are welcome at info@ntmedia.org.
Good afternoon and welcome to Spirit Cafe Show. I'm Barbara Jean.
Hi, Marg.
And I'm Cheryl. And together we are a threesome. Together we really have some great conversations. We definitely come from our own perspective, which is wonderful. We don't script anything. We don't plan anything. We really just have a conversation, see what comes up, and go with the flow.
Mm. And right now, I'd like to take us into this here moment. Just take a breath. Be present. In the spirit of peace and reconciliation, we are grateful for the opportunity to meet on these sacred lands. We thank the generations of people who have taken care of this land for thousands of years. We recognize our oneness. We realize our history. We choose to create a new reality. We are one. Miigwech.
Miigwech.
Thank you.
Oh, we're so grateful. Thank you, Marg. Well, our guest today is Randy Haluza-DeLay, and he works for the Development and Peace as the Central Ontario animator. He is passionate about ecological and global justice. Randy was a wilderness and mountaineering guide for 15 years, and then a university professor for 17 years, tenured in sociology. He edited 2 books on environmental justice and religion and climate change, and published many articles in magazines and academic research journals. He is an avid cyclist who bikes from Toronto to New York City. Did that last summer. Oh, way to go. Please welcome Randy to our show. Welcome, Randy.
Hello, everybody.
So glad you're here.
Hi.
Thank you.
Hi, Randy.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks for joining us today.
For sure. Yeah, it's good to be here.
Yeah. So, Randy, I saw a little other information on you as well that I thought was really interesting. And I thought, oh, so, let's hear a little bit about your background and how you come to where you are today.
Yeah, my background's all over the place. When I was in university, I kept changing my major and eventually settled on things related to the outdoors and to the environment. And then I went off and I became a guide and an outdoor educator for a whole bunch of years. I went back and did my master's because I was asking kind of questions about, like, okay, people are spending all this time in the wilderness. What are they getting out of it? And when they go home, how are they thinking about caring for the environment at home, not just out there in the wilderness? And I was pretty surprised that people weren't making the transfer. They're thinking about taking care of nature out there, but sort of saying, well, here back in the city or the human dominated environments, there's no nature here to take care of. I'm like, okay, well, that's kind of contrary to what I want to happen. So how can we do things differently?
Right.
And so I, continued on with that process. And eventually I, got a doctorate as well, and, became a university professor and, started doing research and published on environmental justice and environmental education, and how faith communities and are interacting with the issue of climate change or the environment in general. And really, how do we connect our interests and our concerns for nature with our spirituality from whatever orientation we're coming from? And how also do we connect it with the fact that there's a heck of a lot of global social inequality, and not everybody experiences either the good parts of the environment, or actually, a lot of some populations experience really negative effects of the environment in disproportionate ways.
Yeah, that's so interesting. What you're saying is that we have a disconnect, right? We're in nature, we love nature, we appreciate nature. We go back to our lives, and it's like out of sight, out of mind.
Yeah, or not so much out of sight, out of mind, as much as like, there's nothing special here. The kids on that wilderness trip, they're teenagers, and they were saying like, wow, nature is something really different then. And they actually made a dichotomy between nature and civilization, wilderness and home. And they said, there's nothing here to care about. So what I said is like, holy mackerel, we've got to find ways to remystify the city, to really point out the urban nature, but also have a more broad understanding of what is the environment. And it's not just, really wild and beautiful places, but it's also, the grass poking between the sidewalk blocks, or the chickadees at the bird feeder, or the anything that we can find to say, we are part of nature, and this is where we live right now. And the way we humans live is what's really impacting the whole global environment, locally and globally.
Yeah.
It was
That's beautiful.
interesting during the COVID lockdown to see what happened with the environment and all the little critters. Everything flourished when we got taken out of the equation.
Yeah.
So I think there is something for sure that we need to learn, which is how to be with that little bit of grass poking through the sidewalks, and the spiders crawling on our ceiling, and the little bugs that roam around. But all of it's interconnected, right? Like there's only one thing going on, and we're all some piece of it. So what you're doing is really important.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And I mean, humans are dominating things. We talk about that we're right now in a historic era called the Anthropocene, where humans have become such a force of geological and planetary impact that we are actually reshaping the atmosphere, the oceans, the land, and everything else. And, human beings and our livestock, the things that we're prepared to eat, are about 96% of the mammal biomass. So that means wild mammals are only 4%. So, the trash pandas here in Toronto, the opossums, the deer, the moose, the Serengeti plains, all the mammals around the world are a teeny little part of things. And, the way I see it is, the creator as, we need to think about the whole community of creation, and that these others are, to some extent, brothers and sisters that also have a relationship with the creator and need to be allowed to live their life in a flourishing way.
Right. Absolutely. And there's so much scientific evidence coming out now, just how intelligent animals, plants, all living things are. And we've just taken it for granted, that we're at the top of the totem pole, and because we can speak and communicate with each other the way we understand, it means that we're the superior mammal, or whatever we want to call it, right? But I was watching something last night actually about plants and how they communicate, and the testing that's being done about how they actually are starting to choose things, or we becoming more aware that they actually choose things. So there's just so much to learn, which is so thrilling and exciting. So I want to ask you, when we talk about ecological justice, is that what you're talking about? Having that more about the awareness and how we take care of things?
So I'd say it's two things. One is, like I said, humans are so dominating that we're not leaving, I'll say, living space or flourishing space for the rest of the creatures on the planet and the rest of the ecosystems. And I mean, what you said about plants being intelligent or being able to communicate. Ecological scientists are finding out that the fungi networks in the soil actually
Yes.
interlink trees, even of different species, to the extent that they will share minerals and other resources needed for growth. So
Mhm.
across species, that's pretty
Yeah.
amazing. So one form of ecological justice, I would say, would be like we talk about caring for nature, but we could also think about, a form of justice. Everybody has certain, and it's hard to talk about rights in this context, but they should have the capability to flourish in the
Mm.
way that I would say again the Creator has gifted them.
Mhm.
But the second part is that the human population, and this is where people who started to do work on environmental justice, both as researchers and then as activists, have pointed out that you know typically marginalized human communities or populations, marginalized in other ways, are also marginalized in terms of the environment. So early research was on environmental racism, pointing out that Black communities in the United States or indigenous communities, we've researched poor communities, and all of them experience way more of a pollution load.
Mhm.
Hazardous waste sites and landfills are located in their communities way more than in wealthier communities that are often not racialized.
Mhm.
And so there's this unequal burden. And
Mhm.
then we expanded from the global north to the global south. For a long
Mhm.
time, countries like Canada were shipping hazardous waste
Mhm.
to poorer countries, which would accept it because it was a little bit of economic activity,
Mhm.
but it meant that we could, we were polluting them, we were dominating them economically and environmentally.
Right.
So that's the
Yeah.
other facet of ecological justice, to really look at
Okay.
how social
Yeah.
inequality really perpetuates itself in environmental ways also.
Right. Wow. Fascinating is it seems like we have to come at this from every angle. It's not just about, whether we're looking after the trees and the plants, we have to look after each other. I think we have to recognize there's only one thing going on and we're all a part of it.
Mhm.
Whether it's animal life, plant life, insect life, the air, the water, humans, we're all part of one system.
Mhm.
And all of it matters. And we go out of our way to do things like wipe out all the mosquitoes because they're an irritant. But I'm sure the mosquitoes are doing something in the environment that's necessary. I don't know what it is. You might, but like we tend to wipe out things that make us uncomfortable.
Mhm.
Yep.
Well, yeah, I think the issue too is that it creates an imbalance, right? We've taken away so much land that you know where do animals live? Where do they survive? Where do these creatures go? And so then you start seeing diminished numbers in populations and things like that. So it really does create that um, imbalance in nature, which I don't think we realize just from having a conversation how big of an impact that has on our planet and our lives.
Yeah, I think our lives are poorer for what's happening. For example, I was just listening to a podcast a week ago that these people had recorded birdsong over a span of 40 years, and they played 1990, 2000, 2010, and now, and you could really hear the decline of the music in the forest. The
Mm.
birds have, and lots of research has shown that bird populations are declining. In
Mhm.
some places, insect populations have declined by 70% because of our pesticides and other things. And yeah, it's a food web.
Mhm.
And for if you want to talk in just instrumental values about what do insects do for us, well, a lot of them pollinate our food crops, for
Mhm.
example. Uh, but the point is that if you keep pulling out strands from a interconnected web, pretty soon you have a pretty sparse web,
Mhm.
and that's at real risk for other, for catastrophic problems.
Mhm.
We could really, really experience, major difficulties even as a human population who thinks they've
Yeah.
got it all together and that our technology will solve things. Well, no, it's all based on nature's stability.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Mhm. Mhm. And yet it's often somebody else's responsibility, isn't it?
It's your
Yeah.
fault.
Yeah, yeah. I've heard that a number of times that it's the big corporations and it's somebody outside of ourselves that has to take care of the problems that we see in the world. It's just a pet peeve for myself, and
Hmm.
I'd like to take us into an individual responsibility here. I just want to go back to something you said earlier, and I'm afraid I forget your wording. You were talking about different populations. You were talking about uh, things that we were shipping to
Mm.
impoverished countries, but you were also talking about communities that something. Mm, like you were saying about the indigenous community, the poor community, the Black community, and that in those areas, something, and I forget the wording now. Can you speak to that in Canada, and what does that mean that you were saying?
Okay.
What does it look like?
Sure. What I was saying is that there are environmental injustices that
Thank you.
certain communities, certain populations experience more of the burdens and
Mhm.
fewer of the amenities
Mhm.
of
Right.
nature. So if you look at a city, most cities, people who are poorer do not have as much access to the parks uh, because they're not located in the more dense parts of the city where more of the poorer population of the city ends up living at. Um, or research has shown, and I think it's shown in Canada as well as the United States, that uh, Black communities, Indigenous communities have way more of the hazardous waste sites, the sanitary landfills,
Mm.
meaning the garbage dumps, located in or near their communities than are located in, middle class communities or, places where people have a little bit more ability to say no and not in our backyard. Um, Definitely across Canada, we do see Indigenous communities facing a lot of problems. I mean, the current government came in a number of years ago with a promise to reduce the drinking water issues in unindigenous reserves, and they've done a lot of work on that. But the point is that there were a lot of problems. If you remember back to when the Ontario community of Walkerton experienced an E. coli
Mhm.
breakout, man, provincial and other governments just flooded in there with bottled water and everything. Well, at one point we had, I don't remember the numbers anymore, and it's that's kind of trivia right now because everything changes over time. But we had hundreds of indigenous communities that had drinking water problems. Nobody was flooding them with bottled water.
Mhm.
Um, and you did mention that sometimes we blame corporations or governments. Well, unfortunately, they have a greater impact than
Mhm.
individuals. And often we individualize, the 101 things you can do to save the environment. Well, me recycling plastic bags or reusing them or things like that is only going to have a tiny little impact. And even if hundreds of us, thousands of us, millions of us do that, it's only going to have a small impact. So we do need to have a bigger collective impact, and we really need to talk about how things are being produced, how things are being disposed of, the entire life cycle. We need to change our lifestyle. Change our lifestyles, but we also need governments to step in and say, okay, this is the way we want things to be, and we need corporations or any kind of collected body, like church congregations and other faith communities, saying, okay, we're going to do things differently so that we have a greater impact on protecting the creation that we believe the Creator made.
Yeah, I agree with you, and my point is that it's both. I just hear too many times that it's the them, and so I don't need to do anything here. It's the big guys that control everything. Yeah. And I hear you loud and clear.
I agree with you. It's both. It's both and. And you can think of it as, my behaviors are small, but they're a thin edge of the wedge. They make me more aware. As I do things, other people around me will see, or I will participate with other people. Like I remember 30 years ago, I was living in a community house with a bunch of other people, and I was really bothered by somebody running the water constantly as they were washing the dishes. So rather than complaining about it, which I think I had probably done already and it hadn't gone anywhere, at one point I stepped in and helped that person wash dishes. And I at least turned the water down. I don't know if I turned it off or not, but it was a more gentle way of kind of pointing out that we could use less water in that way. But again, those are small potatoes things. They're important because they make us more aware and then more motivated to do things. And they give us hope, which is a big issue. I mean, we talk a lot about things like climate anxiety. Well, the antidote to that is to do some things, take some steps, work together with other people, have a community of support. That's the real benefit that faith communities have, is we can support each other.
Well, and it's interesting that, when we take a look at, one person's really does seem like small potatoes, but there's 8 billion one persons. That's not small potatoes at all. If every one of us was 1% better, we'd have a huge global impact that would be profound. So one person matters big time.
And one Canadian matters more than 20 Nigerians or Bangladeshis because of the way our lifestyles are.
Exactly.
And because of, like, for example, 75%, no, I think the number has dropped now. It might be closer to 60% of the mining companies in the world are headquartered in Canada.
Wow.
So, we Canadians have an outsized impact compared to people in other countries. So we're not all on an equal basis. And that's a really important thing to recognize, that, so for example, 10 years or so ago, I decided to stop eating meat one day a week. And I picked Friday because, that was historically the day that Catholics were supposed to fast from meat. So, as a Catholic, I did that. But you know what? It's a 1 out of 7 stop eating meat. It's a 14% reduction in my meat eating. And over time, it became easier and easier as I learned how to cook without meat and, learned to like other things. Chickpeas are awesome. Tofu is good if you get the right kind and learn how to cook it and stuff like that. And, lentils and black beans. Oh my gosh, black beans. Holy mackerel. Give me a tortilla shell. So, I don't know how often I eat meat now. It's, I still eat it. I don't have an issue with that. But the point is that my lifestyle is a really different lifestyle than a lot of people. And so my impact and our collective impacts, and then what our corporations do, partly to support our lifestyles, but also partly because they're providing commodities into the global markets. We really have an outsized impact. And so we need to think in a more fair and kind of egalitarian way.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Has a ripple effect. Everything has a ripple effect. Yeah. And so you were talking about, corporations and individuals. I mean, it's really about taking responsibility. It's about being accountable and responsible for our part. And if we can just grow that awareness, because I think that's often, the case is that the more I learn, the more I recognize how little I know or knew, right? And how my awareness grows as I learn more about nature and about, systems that coexist and co-create and, all these things, like Barbara said, there's one thing going on. And definitely the shows that are coming out, the things that I'm seeing are proving that scientifically, which is so amazing. I said to my husband when I was watching this one show, it's like so much has been discovered about nature since I was a kid, right? I was taught about how rain is made, and I can't remember what the word is, where the heat turns water into vapor, which goes up to the top, which makes a cloud, which gets heavy and then comes down and it rains. Well, now I've learned that there's so much more to it, and how everything going on in the whole world impacts that. Right? So again, it's like learning about these things and becoming excited about our living planet and how we want to take care of it.
Yeah. And it really is a living, breathing, interconnected planet. And that's why I think the concept of the Anthropocene is important. Because again, just to say it again, it's that humanity as a collective, but again, recognizing that some people have more responsibility and impact than others, has become a force that is reshaping planetary dynamics in the atmosphere, in the oceans, on land, the water cycle, and things like that. Now, the risk with that idea, though, is that we start to think bad about humanity. We start to say, "Oh man," and I've heard this. In fact, I heard it yesterday from somebody. If human beings just were killed off, the Earth would be so much better. Like, okay, I'm sorry, I'm a human being. I don't want us to be killed off. And that's just misanthropy. That's no better. It's better for us to find our good role in the planet. As companions with the other species and the rest of creation, as part of the whole community of creation. With our particular roles and our ability to think and our ability to make moral judgments too about how we should live and what would be the good ways to live.
Yeah, how we could live.
And if we learn how to coexist. I remember when I was going to Kenya, and one of the people I was talking to, who had been at the conference a few years earlier, had talked about the geckos, and that somebody had a gecko in their room and they were freaked out about it, and she just said, it's their home or visiting. And I remembered that when I got there, and when the little gecko showed up in the corner of my room, I just went, oh, hey, check it out. I'm glad it wasn't crawling near me, but that idea landed with me, that this is the gecko's home and you're visiting. So maybe you could be patient, and I think we forget that sometimes. We think we're the ones that really matter, and everything else should be kicked to the curb. Everybody.
Okay, so what if that was some poisonous critter in your room? Would you have the same? I wouldn't have that. I won't put you on the spot. I'll say to myself, I would not be as generous with that feeling.
If it was a poisonous critter, I would gently back out of the room and go find somebody who would lovingly take it away. And when we were staying at the Maasai Lodge, the gentleman would come in, and they would, somebody had a large lizard in their room and they freaked out about it. So somebody came in and just gently moved it out to the door, right? They don't hurt them. They just want them to go outside.
Yeah, which is so lovely. It's time for a break.
It is.
Barbara, time to take a 2-minute break. and we'll be back. So don't go away. We're having a wonderful conversation, and hopefully, I'll remember what I was thinking to pick up where we left off. But I'm sure if I don't, my co-hosts will. And this is a wonderful conversation. Thank you so much, Randy. We'll be back in a couple of minutes. See you then.
Please help us say thank you to our organizational sponsors, including the Hepperlin Foundation, Affiliated New Thought Network, International New Thought Alliance, Science of Mind Archives and Library Foundation, Center for Spiritual Living Denver, Center for Spiritual Living Midtown, New Thought Philadelphia, Planned Happiness Institute, Summit Center for Spiritual Living, One Heart Retreats, Center for Spiritual Living on the Lake, Unity Spiritual Center, Kitchener, Om Center for Spiritual Living, La Mesa, Satya Center, Center for Spiritual Living, North Jersey, Unity of Savannah, and Center for Spiritual Living, Seattle, as well as all of our individual donors. Thank you for making New Thought Media Network a place to be. Please come be you. And remember, like, share, and subscribe. New Thought Media Network, positively inspiring.
Welcome to Out of My Mouth, the program where raw thoughts meet unfiltered conversations.
Join us as we dive into the depths of human experience, where we share stories, perspectives, and insights that just might challenge the status quo.
Get ready to laugh, cry, and ponder the world around you like never before. This is Out of My Mouth. We're rebranding the show.
That was so fun.
It was, and that was a great way to introduce that we are rebranding.
We are rebranding the show. So back to the mosquito conversation.
Yes. So I, different than a poisonous critter coming at me, I don't want a mosquito biting me either. So what do we do with the mosquitoes? I'm not going to spray my yard with some nasty chemical. That's not.
I spray my body with vinegar. And it works really well. And the smell goes away in seconds.
Really?
I was just going to say, you smell edible then.
Yeah, yummy. No. No, I mix it with a little bit of water, just spray myself down, the mosquitoes stay away. Non-toxic.
Okay. I do the essential oil thing. Randy, what do you think? What's your comment here?
You know what? For the most part, I try to wear long sleeve shirts, and I have less skin exposed, and I don't swat them because it ends up making me all like anxious and everything. So I just kind of blow them away. And if they really start to bug me, I will use bug spray, but mostly I'll put it in my ears and on the bald spot that you can't see on the top of my head, because those are the places they tend to go to. And at the ears, that buzz is just as annoying as they come. So,
Yeah, it
for the
is.
most part, if they bite my legs, and I'm also not very allergic to mosquitoes, so I can get away with that. Other people are different.
Yeah. And I find I perspire a lot in my face, my head. So I get a lot of mosquito bites. They seem to appreciate my perspiration. They love me and eat me alive when I go outside. But the vinegar helps.
I think Cheryl had something to say, but Randy, I wanted to say that when I'm hearing you, I'm hearing words coming out of your mouth that are in a balanced way. So I can receive your information and it doesn't seem all one-sided. You're coming out very balanced.
Yes.
Nothing's right or wrong. Well, yeah, I'll just leave it as balanced. I enjoy what you have to say. So thank you.
Can I quote Wendell Berry here?
Sure.
He had a great quote from an article back in 1979. And I won't get it exactly right, but the gist of it is when we oh man, I'm going to get it really wrong now that I'm on the spot, right? when we live in creation and we act respectfully and we care and we are careful, then it's like a sacrament. But when we act wantonly and destructively and ignorantly and unknowingly and uncarefully, then it's desecration. And so that's the balance, like we have to live. Oh, and he started out by saying when we break the body and the blood of nature, which is kind of, it throws it back into the Christian symbology, right? But again, that's the point, is like we have to live. I'm going to live by eating things, and it doesn't matter if it's a carrot; it still had a life. But I can't live on carrots alone anymore. I can live on bread alone. So, again, we have to be balanced. But that means that not only do we have to think really carefully about what that means, because but we also have to talk about it with other people. But we have to really think carefully because we've normalized a lot of stuff that doesn't necessarily have to be normalized. I'll go back to my example of eating meat. I grew up on meat every single day, 2 or 3 meals a day, and that was normal. And I've shifted that because I've learned about the environmental impacts of eating meat. I've tried to reduce my air flights because I've learned about the environmental impacts of air flights and the extensive carbon emissions there. So what had been normal, I've tried to shift so that there's a new normal, which is more in line with what I want to see. And if I take a flight a year, that's way more than the vast majority of the human population does, in not only in a year, but in a decade, if not more. So we need to shift the normal and what we consider normal. And that takes a community of support. It's really hard for me to do that on my own. My parents, my mom and my brothers and so forth, they live a long ways away. And so, I have to travel to see them. How often am I going to see them? And they want me to see them a lot more often than I'm willing to fly to see them. Right. So we have to talk about that, and they're not very happy with my decisions. But I have a bunch of friends who are like, okay, Randy, you're trying really hard to be ethical, So again, try to make that balance, because the one ethic is, caring for my family. Another, and my mother's getting older. Another ethic is, caring for the earth. And, that's also really important. And since I recognize my privilege and in being able to make those decisions, I have to think really carefully through them.
Yeah. I was just looking up the Wendell Berry quotes, and there are a lot of them.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Yeah, but I really love to cherish what remains of the earth and to foster its renewal is our only legitimate hope of survival.
Wow.
Wow.
Yeah, it's powerful.
It is. And we have, I sometimes get, annoyed with my husband. I'll put something in recycling and he'll go, you can't put that in there. That one goes to compost. That one goes to garbage. That one. And then we'll buy something. He'll say, okay, we can't buy stuff because now there's So some days like, oh, come on. I became vegan because of the impact of, the cattle industry, chicken industry, global, chopping down trees to grow crops. But I watch my husband and I'm so grateful for him because he keeps me on track.
Mhm. Yeah, I have to say, every time I throw something in the recycling, I feel guilty. Not because I'm putting in the recycling, but because here's another, thing that's been used that didn't need to be, or maybe is overused, or whatever the case may be, right? It's a challenge, and it's something that we do have to consider. I must say, though, I do struggle with politics in the sense that, it's all about what the people want to survive without recognizing that there's a component of looking at what we're doing long term. So maybe that's what I'm trying to say. It's more about they look at things short term and how do we cater to people short term, instead of looking at it long term and creating more awareness and education and all the rest of it around that. And, same with packaging and things like that. Plastic came to the fore, but that was, I think, because people were driving that, right? And so there needs to be more of that consideration, and still that is backwards and forwards, I find, in some areas of politics.
Yeah, I mean, people often get up. They don't want to get into the politics. But a lot of things are political. I mean, I came from Alberta, and even just talking a little bit about climate change, and I published one book on climate change, and so I know the scientific data and the social science, but people didn't want to talk about it, even though it was extremely fact based, because it had implications for their lives, but it also had implications for what the province ought to be doing differently, or what the federal government ought to be doing differently. But those are really important because the political sphere is one of the areas that we make a collective difference.
Mm-hmm.
For example, we're trying to make a shift away from gas-powered automobile engines. There's a push towards electric vehicles. There are rebates for electric vehicles in some provinces. When I was in Alberta, I couldn't buy an electric vehicle that I wanted because they weren't shipping it there because there were no rebates. And they said, you know what, it's just easier to sell them in Ontario and British Columbia and Quebec where there are rebates. But more importantly, the federal government could do a really good job of developing an electric charging infrastructure, not so much subsidizing the individual purchases of electric vehicles, but developing a system across the country where it becomes much easier to charge your electric vehicle. And so you're not kind of wondering if you're going to run out of electricity. But hey, I've run out of gas too. So, it's kind of the same thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Talking about that, actually, is that truly helpful to our environment? Because I started thinking about the batteries and what's in the batteries and what do we do with the batteries when the batteries are done? And, so it's almost like, okay, we're diverting our attention from here and putting it there, and we're seeing the pros, but who's talking about the cons?
Oh man, way too many people are talking about the cons. Honest to gosh, there's so much misinformation and disinformation out there. So if you think about that, what you just talked about was a disposal issue, and that's relatively easy to get figured out in time. And it's kind of a small impact at one time. There's also the mining of the critical earth minerals that are needed for electric vehicles. But again, that's a relatively small impact at a point in time that could be managed because it's easier to manage, particular points. Whereas, we know that fossil fuel powered vehicles are constantly emitting carbon emissions, like not just at a point in time, but across a long period of time. And so the overall impact of them is way more. And for about a decade, I have been having a buddy of mine who teaches at the University of Alberta in engineering run the numbers, because every couple of years somebody asks me, and is it better to power up my electric vehicle? Because Alberta was primarily gas powered electricity at the time. And is it better to do that knowing that I'm using coal? Sorry, not gas powered, it was coal powered.
Mm-hmm.
Knowing that I'm using coal. And, my friend would run the numbers and you go, yep, still better than running gasoline engines all the time, even if we are using coal. And we still should push to get off coal, get off gas as well.
Yeah.
Alberta has a magnificent wind energy industry,
Mm-hmm.
and it was developing a really good solar energy industry before certain political decisions eliminated some opportunities for that.
Yeah.
And here I'm being a little bit generous in the way I'm saying things.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah,
saw that. I'm from
hear you.
Alberta, so I have some inside information there. It is an oil and gas province, and they like it that way. What about hydrogen-powered vehicles? I was looking at Toyota has come out with a hydrogen vehicle, but there are no stations here in Ontario, but there are in British Columbia. So what about hydrogen?
See, that's the thing. I don't know all the details of all the different technologies. So I can't say very much about those particular things. What I will generally say to people is that, if we're trying to do good, if we're trying to do something better, it probably is better, at least a little bit better. There are going to be problems with it because no solution is perfect.
Mm-hmm.
So you keep problem solving the problems, but you keep working towards the ultimate solutions.
Okay.
And like I said, there's a lot of misinformation and disinformation, often because of vested interests or legacy industries or things like that. So just keep trying to do what you think is good, and keep being open to having our minds changed and to be in dialogue with other people. I'm from Alberta also, and I did community-based workshops, often in churches, for about 5 years before I left the province. And over those 5 years, I did 20 or more a year. And at first, people were like, "Oh, climate change isn't an issue," and then they're like, "Oh, climate change might be something, but is it really human caused?" And so what I'm saying is there was a shift. Oh, climate change, is it as serious as people are saying it is? So the denialism went down, and now they're trying to figure out what to do. And frankly, in Alberta, as you know, a lot of people do make pretty good livings and support families off of the fossil fuel industry.
Yeah.
So knowing that that's a bad thing, in not the fossil fuel industry is a bad thing, not making a living and supporting families, that's a good thing. How can we do the good thing in ways that don't continue to promote at a really high level the bad thing?
Right.
That's always the decision to make. It's
And that's someplace where government could step in and offer training programs. And, here we're moving in another direction. I mean, there's got to be people building electric cars. There's got to be people who are solving some of these issues. So we need to retrain the workforce. I thought that might happen when the whole industry, the auto industry, went into a bit of a funk a number of years ago. But the government bailed them out so they could just keep on keeping on. It's like, what? Like, let's retrain people. Let's create, let's work together to create a world
alternatives.
Some new ideas. Let's come up with some new ideas. I was talking to somebody last night who works for the Royal Bank, and they were talking about one of the things the Royal Bank does is they have this special, not that the Royal Bank is the end all be all, but just that they have this project where they recruit the top 10 people in universities to find a solution for a particular difficulty. And they have 4 months to do it. And if they solve it, they get a bunch of cash and they get a job. And, couldn't we in the environmental industry look at how can we create incentives for these brilliant young minds that are coming up to begin to move towards some of these solutions?
And again, I'll say that it's not only the technological solutions. We need to have social solutions. we need to rethink some of what we're doing, or why we're doing things. And that's harder work, to be honest. It's a lot easier to engineer a new solution than to you can't engineer society because human beings don't want to be engineered. You know, we don't want to be told what to do. So again, that's why I like to work with faith communities, because it's at least one area where people are talking about the issues and trying to say, what is the good thing for us to do? What is good? So they have that moral conversation, and then they're able to support each other. So there's a number of initiatives, for example, that are trying to help green sacred spaces. It doesn't matter whether you're a mosque, a gurdwara, a church, or whatever. Can we green the space? You know, can you? Um, I know that a former church that I was associated with has just put solar panels on the roof because they got a grant from the city to do that. So great, super. Like, it wasn't a possibility a number of years ago when we had looked into it, but apparently the technology has improved, but also the mindset of the people in the church has changed because it has become a more important issue to them. So there was the support for the idea. And then people are also talking more extensively about what do we do in our own individual lives? You know, how do we, you know, staycation rather than vacation at long distances? You know, so those are examples of some of the social changes. And again, you can't really do it on your own very easily, or else you look like you're an outlier. And nobody really wants to be an outlier. You know, it's like, you know, being the one flower that sticks above the green grass in the front lawn that the lawnmower cuts off. You don't want to be that. Well, then again, maybe we shouldn't have front lawns. Maybe we should be, you know, naturalizing or permaculturing, growing food and stuff out there.
I have a neighbor who his whole backyard is a garden, vegetables. He's got corn, he's got potatoes, he's got beans, he's got, you name it, front yard, same thing, growing all manner of stuff. And you know, we look at and we think that, you know, even when we're looking at the amount of money that we need to earn, we think we need to earn so much money to cover all the food that we're eating. But imagine what would happen if we did turn our yards into gardens. If we were growing our own potatoes and things like that, that especially the root vegetables that will winter in a cool space. Like, we don't have to, you know, they don't have to stay fresh in the freezer or something. You can actually, there's so much we could do, but it's getting everybody sort of coming at it from all different directions at once.
Well, that's a good example, because in some cities there's bylaws about growing food in your front yard. Not allowed to do that. And in other places, because my partner and I, we naturalized our front yard because I didn't really like looking out the window at just a whole bunch of grass. So at first we tried to let the grass grow, and that started because I had a bench out in the front, and I noticed a nest of baby rabbits under the bench in the grass. I'm like, okay, we're gonna let the grass grow. And then one day I went to the front window and I looked out and said, hey, where's the bench? Oh my gosh, it's been moved. Oh my gosh, the whole lawn has been mowed. Oh my gosh, my neighbor mowed the lawn because he thought it was ugly looking. I wonder what happened to the rabbits. But so we couldn't let nature take over the yard naturally. We had to be more deliberate about it. But we did, because, you know, I wanted a place to sit in the front that felt natural, was screened from the road a little bit, and it was also a lot easier to take care of. Not that I put a lot of effort into my grass, but, you know, at least it would be more enjoyable to look at, to sit in, and, you know, lots of reasons. And so we did that, and we did try to grow food out there, but I'm a pretty bad gardener. I think I let a qualified farmer do it for me, because I think it'll work a lot better. But, you know, that's the point. You know, we all have our gifts, and we need to use our gifts as they are, which include what we're interested in, what we like to do.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Our talk show in Kitchener, Mike Farwell's show, he's a gentleman that likes to poke the bear locally. He had a guest on today talking about natural cemeteries, and that there's only one in Canada, and that's in BC, actually, that is totally natural, and a tombstone is a rock where somebody's name is on it, and there's no cremation because of the environment. It was quite an interesting conversation. about that. But I want to go briefly back to the batteries of the cars. Because I hear you, I don't want to put, pardon the pun, a brake on it, because I hear what you're saying. Yes, you need to go to the future, keep moving forward, because until the solution, you don't want to stop the evolution of creating a healthy environment by saying, okay, I'm not going to buy an electric car until this is solved. But tell me what's happening with those batteries now? Do you know?
To be honest, I do not know the details of that. But what I will say, though, is that electric vehicles are only a transition measure. Like, we cannot continue to have everybody with multiple personal automobiles.
Yeah.
We could go to other solutions. I do have a car. I ride my bike around the city of Toronto a lot. It's got a decent bike infrastructure near where I live. I know that out in the outskirts, it's not as good. It's got a better bike infrastructure than Edmonton, where I used to live. But honest to gosh, I felt better riding my bike on city streets in Edmonton than in Toronto, because I think that the culture of driving is different. Like, the drivers seem more aggressive here, and like, I just feel at more risk. And I'm a former mountaineering guide and a whitewater rafting guide. I'm used to taking on risk, but I'm getting older and I don't want to get hit by a car. And my bike helmet won't help me if I get hit by a car. They help me in a low speed crash, but not in a normal speed crash. But back to electric vehicles, they're a stopgap measure because we have a culture of driving places, and we do want to go out of the city, for example, and drive somewhere where there isn't public transit. There's the opportunity for car sharing. Like, most people park their car the vast majority of the time. Do you really need your own car parked? You might drive it to work, park it, drive it home, park it, that kind of thing. So other solutions would be more walkability. You got grocery stores close enough to walk to? Things like that. Public libraries, or things, whatever you need. Other solutions are car sharing programs where, there's a car parked down the road from a car sharing, company that, if I didn't have my own car, I'd probably just sign up for that. And the once every week or two that I use a car, just borrow or rent that one. In fact, my employer, who does have me traveling into the outskirts, into rural Ontario, has said, what, it's better for you to just rent a car than for you to keep driving your own, because it's less cost, and I can get I have a hybrid, but a hybrid isn't an electric vehicle. So he says, what if you rent an electric vehicle? You'll have even less emissions, which is associated with the ecological justice and social justice things that we want to do with development and peace where I work. So, EVs are transition measures, I think, because we need to move to a different model. We just can't keep having all of these personal automobiles. But we're not going to be there yet, and we can't do everything immediately. But we do want to push forward.
Yeah.
Well, we're at the end of our time.
Thank you, Randy.
Oh my gosh, already? No, I had so much more to say.
I know. 2 minutes left. We'll have to have you back when we're doing our new show, Out of My Mouth. This has been really wonderful. Thank you so much for being here. And do you have a quick final thought for people to take away?
Hoy vey, I have a lot of thoughts, but I mean, it was really wonderful to talk with you all. And it's clear that you're all thinking. And I think that it showed that we're thinking about different things.
Yeah.
All kind of in the same direction, or in a similar direction of what can we do and what makes sense in our own lives. So I want to go back to that idea of keeping to ask that question about, the making sense, because some things that used to make sense, we now consider nonsense. One of the examples I use constantly is, it used to make sense that people thought women just weren't intellectually able to go to university, be doctors, or be lawyers. And we just think that's complete and utter nonsense now. So I think that what we think now about our lives and how we as human beings participate in the rest of creation is going to be seen as nonsense by future generations.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you, Cheryl. Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Deja, in the background. And we'll be back again next week, and we'll have more courageous conversations. Thank you, Randy. You were awesome.
Absolutely. Wonderful conversation. Thanks, Randy.
Thank you all.
Bye,
On
everyone.
behalf of everyone at New Thought Media Network, thank you for being a member of our virtual family. Your financial contributions help share the New Thought message with people from around the world. Please visit and contribute at www.ntmedia.org/donate. New Thought Media Network, come be you. And please like, share, and subscribe. Until next time, peace and blessings.